Thursday, November 2nd, Century Guild Salon. Sorry, Chandra. Fake accents are outlawed in our home. So, yeah, tonight is interesting because we have, everybody should have this. If you don't, you'll have it in the next few days. Is it in focus? But yeah, I'm super, super happy with the way this book turned out. If you're not familiar with this book, it's probably available on our web store now, but it's a Kickstarter that we did where we're starting a new series that explores German Art Nouveau. And the thing that's interesting and distinct about German Art Nouveau is it really specifically influenced what we think of as the psychedelic art movement. This font on the cover is a very German font. Again, where's our focus plane here? You can see it looks like a psychedelic rock poster. This art in the first book is a little bit more tame because at this time they were still kind of rooted in classicism. Again, where's the focus plane? Sorry, guys. But as it developed, it turned really quickly into an art style that blended the curvilinear elements of Art Nouveau with a bit of a folklorish fairy tale element. Like when we think about fairy tales and you hear about the original versions that are very dark, it's like the German, the Brothers Grimm influence. So the convergence of that kind of German dark sensibility with the aesthetics of this burgeoning movement of Art Nouveau made for a really, really incredible time in art history. And I've always loved the German Art Nouveau. It's grossly underrepresented in academic settings. And with this book, we are really getting into it. And, it's going to be a series that we do that is curated. And things like the Orchid Garden, we didn't curate. We just were completists about it. And this one is closer to, to the way we would put together an exhibition. And then the next book that's coming out, and is the focus okay on this stuff, Chandra? Otherwise, Brandon should come in and focus. Is Beautiful Macabre. Again, where's the focus plane? This turned out great. We had done a small paperback, and we leaned a little more heavily into macabre. And there was a lot of art in there that was a little more wartime grotesque, just weird, very dark posters. And the thing that we did with this is, as I was editing it, we wound up, this is twice the scale. The original is even smaller than this, so we blew it up immensely. It's smaller than this, so it would be more like that kind of. So that's the difference in scale. So a lot bigger. And did a hardcover. But the thing that we did that I'm most proud of is there's a ton of work in here that isn't in the soft cover. Things like the famous Dance of Death poster, we put in the German release. And then we also put the Austrian release in by Teo Matejko. More Fenneker. So, but you can see it's beautiful and it's macabre. Like we did lean into that idea of where those two things converge. You know, like look how beautiful that line art is, but of course it's the head of Medusa. And so this one, you can get this on Kickstarter right now for like another week. And we also made T-shirts with this Egypt moth by Bernard Pancock that I love. So we did a Kickstarter for this when we did softcover. We did another one for the hardcover. And then because the books will be here shortly, they're on the ship, we decided to celebrate, because it took so long to get this finished, to celebrate by making some artworks with that Egypt moth. When we first thought we were doing this, there was another artwork that I was kind of using as my design element. And funnily enough, working on the Jugendstil book, I found that moth and I was like, oh, this is beautiful and macabre. And so we wound up then, it's kind of throughout the book. You've got it on the title page, the signing sheet for the slipcase edition is the moth. We work it in there. And so we thought, that'd be great on a t-shirt and tote bag. And so we decided to do that just kind of as a celebration. It's your last chance to, does this have the signing sheet in it? It does. Yeah, so the signing sheet is vellum and has the Egypt moth. And it comes in a slipcase, which I didn't even pause on. But the slipcase is also, backwards, is also the Egypt moth. And it's a fabric that matches the rounded spine. But I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud with how it turned out. I've been collecting those artworks for, oh my God, over 20 years. And because we had a gallery, things come and go. But there's a lot in there that really represent some of the most interesting things that we've ever had. And so I'll go through that book a little bit now. I've got Jugendstil up. I've also got, let me share this. How do I do this? Okay, Chandra, will you add that window to the discussion? This is page 98. So the soft cover was only 80 pages. So this, I think, ended at 128. Yeah. And we've got 3 or 4 ad pages at the end. But this is an example of one of the areas where we put things in that weren't in the soft cover. Really leaning into the spooky cabaret material. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Yeah, you've got this sexy redhead with a fuzzy bat, and this one is called Shadows and Light. It's a take on Beauty and the Beast. This is for a play from the director of the Grand Guignol. He went to open a new theater, and Destination Unknown is the name of that. Laughter and Terror. And so there was a lot of this kind of stuff in the older one. And I did leave a lot of it, but it, like the silent film stuff we left, but there was a lot of this kind of stuff where it was just a little more brutal. And more so than this even. And I just really wanted with this one to focus a little more on. Let me pull another one up. Here, let's pull this one up. Okay. You know, this is kind of a good example. That's really macabre, but it's also just something oddly beautiful about it. So I did move more into that kind of space with this. Lots of details in this one that really show off the beautiful lithography. That was something that we didn't do in the first one, but with this larger format, I thought it was so important to so important to, I mean, look at that. Oh my gosh. And it's such great stone lithography. So whether you're just an art lover or if you're interested in the historical information, the artworks are so well represented through this expansion. And then obviously there's a lot of text in here. So if you want to know, I make sure there's enough details and tidbits spread throughout. If you're an artist, it's definitely going to be inspirational. Oh, look at that. Again, the line work is so good that the larger format really... So for tonight, because a lot of these posters I have here, we were going to do a presentation with the posters, but with glare and everything, we really decided it would just be better to show some of these PDFs. Like this is one that wasn't in the old one. Sorry, I keep saying but look at that. I mean, that's Joseph Fenneker, and again, perfect example of, to me, what the spirit of Beautiful Macabre was. And the stuff that was just really grotesque, I felt like just pulled us away from the potential of this to be a real celebration of the way a darker aesthetic can be elegant and gorgeous, and you know, that you can have skulls and masks and whatever else, and it can be beautiful. We've got, let's see. So I'm going to have more of the interior of these PDFs. Does anybody have any questions about these books? I've also got the Jugendstil, in case someone didn't pick that up. Where's that? Chandra, this is the Jugendstil window that you can put in there. One of the things that's really interesting to me about Jugendstil as an aesthetic is that it's, when we see text interlocking with visuals, that is something that was really prevalent. I mean, there's, you know, this I guess is a good example. The way the flames become the letters in this. And the thing that made me think of that when I was just looking at that title page is how much this kind of decorative element, how valuable that is to anybody who's an illustrator or creator, to look at the ways that you can, you know, as a separating line, but then of course it's this, I mean, look at these fish, look at how cool this is. Let me find the, I mean, look at that. the use of negative space. And just to remind everyone, if you have not been here before, that questions and comments are encouraged. The main reason we do this is it's meant to replace the nights we'd have at the gallery where you could just come in and talk about art. And so I'm using the books as a starting point. But if you have questions about anything in the books, please voice them, and I will gladly answer whatever I can. Here's another great one with the text working in being her hair. Such a great design element. And this, of course, I see this on the internet all the time, so it's nice to be able to put it out there in a really high resolution. That's just such a great image. There's an interesting thing in here. This is, where is it? The artwork that we used on the cover is, what's her name? The Pythia. She was a priestess of Apollo, and the idea is Apollo had slain a snake, and out from the cavern where its corpse was rotting, these fumes would come, and the priestess, the Pythia, would sit on a three-legged stool, and then her hallucinations, when she inhaled these fumes, would allow her to commune directly with Apollo and speak to the populace, his worshippers, on behalf of the god. So there's a really funny thing where they do Max Kleider did this artwork called The Critic, and you've got a guy sitting on a three-legged stool, and the fumes that cause him to have his visions are his never-ending cups of coffee. And in this case, the critic is the owner of a bookstore, and he's sitting there talking about how terrible Jugendstil is and how terrible the Jugend magazine is and that it's an effrontery to culture. And then while he's saying all this, the front bell rings and he rushes to the front to take an order for a subscription to Jugend magazine. So the idea being that critics like to complain, but they don't control the course of culture. So I thought that was very funny, and I liked the fact that in the same issue, they did that pun, that play. Hi, Forrest. Yeah, Marmor House. So Joseph Fenneker, who did all of those, let me pull up one of those. So Joseph Fenneker, who did all of those images, the way that it worked at that time is it wasn't where, Chandra, you could share this. So all of these posters by Joseph Fenneker, not the bottom one here with the skull, but the top one, Haunted Castle, the prostitution one, and then Haas, and then of course this one. So Joseph Fenneker created all the posters for Marmor House. Marmor House was in Berlin, and they would premiere the major films. It was the house, and it wasn't like it is today where they would have, movies opening all across the country, all across the globe. This would be limited numbers of films going out in stages. And so Marmor House premiered the films. Joseph Fenneker was their poster artist. But just to reference the comment you made about what a beautiful movie house it looked like, Joseph Fenneker did all the murals inside the theater. So if you can imagine these big artworks or artworks like this, just all over the inside. It was so beautiful and creepy and weird and beautiful. Beautiful Art Deco theater filled with Joseph Fenneker art, and then a rotating series of posters like this in the lobby. Like, it would have just been such an experience. And when people ask me about my love for this German art, oh, well, have you gone to Berlin? And the answer is no, because my Berlin doesn't exist anymore. The Weimar era, this era before World War II, was, I mean, in the first place, it was stomped out by politics, and then the second place by bombing. So things like the Marmor House Theater only exist in photographs, unfortunately. But you know, we have books and we have films and things like that. And that comes back to why we make these books. Like a lot of these posters, like this homunculus, like this is not in any books. I got this from a book dealer, gosh, 20 years ago, sight unseen. It was expensive, and he didn't have a picture of it. And, you know, it was at a time when people didn't just have camera phones. And I was like, you know, it's a homunculus poster from Austria. It's going to, just academically, it's important to preserve. So when I got it, it was folded up the way that it was when it was shipped in a film can, and mounted it on linen, washed it, deacidified it, and photographed it. And so if you see this image anywhere, it's the one that I found. It's the only copy that anyone's ever seen. Same thing with this. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 copies in the world. This is another one. I'd be shocked if there was a second copy. I got this from a poster dealer who dealt in the rarest material. And so when we make these books, when you're looking at these larger resolution images, you know, these are pieces that we've photographed to make sure they're high resolution. It's also why we're able to do things like these double page spreads, because we've been able to go in and photograph them super close at super high resolution. And so, yeah, when people say, have you been to Berlin? It's like, yeah, it doesn't, you know, Berlin really only exists in these books. And so this is another example. With a JPEG on the internet, you could never get close enough, and it's not really going to show up compressed on the internet, but to really see the details of the lithography. And so whether you're an artist wanting to really learn subtleties of technique, or you just love the art and you want to be able to experience it, we're trying to move it as close as possible to being in a museum and being able to really look at these and get a sense of what it's like to look at these in person. And I think, yeah, these wind up getting broken up because when they go to the printer, just because they're large files. But things like, yeah, these against alcohol illness, you know, it's a great graphic, a great design, a great message. This is for a musical in 1920. This one I've had a really hard time with. I've been trying to research this for 20 years, and I've not been able to find like a handbook, like a brochure from it or anything. Yeah, that's a sore spot, just in terms of the part of me that's curious has been grossly unfulfilled in my research there. And it's another silent film poster. Yeah, and so many of these, like this one, I mean, the copy that we had, I wound up selling it, but it's the only time I've ever seen it anywhere, museums, anything. Same thing with this one. Never seen it in a museum collection. Never seen it ever come up for sale. And then posters like this, they're really, really, really rare. But I've probably seen 4 or 5 copies over the last 20 years. So still really rare, but you know, the pride for me is in curating the entire thing. But it's this stuff where, you know, yeah, maybe you can find a JPEG online, but not where you can see all of the lithographic, and we're probably losing it on the internet, but all of the lithographic detail. And this is another great one. The way that leads to damnation. And some of these, like this one, this is actually a detective film. And it's kind of funny that it's a different kind of era of advertising, of course, but the movie looks nothing like this. It's so expressionist that it's giving you an abstract sensibility of what the movie was. But, you know, the movie is black and white with a guy in a tuxedo and, you know, kind of a standard, whatever your Mission Impossible or Bourne Identity films would have been, probably in a much lower budget tier. Well, certainly in a lower budget tier. But, you know, but look how cool this art is. Like the exaggerated. And the one thing that I would point out when you look at exaggerated art like this is the thing you're looking for is consistency. When you're looking at Egon Schiele, the reason that Egon Schiele works is that he started out drawing like Klimt and found his own voice, his own opinion, his own lens through which everything was distorted. The biggest mistake that any artist makes is not planting the flower and then letting it grow into the shape that it's going to be. They look at art like this and say, oh, I'm going to draw like that. And they kind of try to draw like a little bit of a funky style. And I can always tell when that's where they started. And the reason I can tell is there's an inconsistency, like on the DNA level of the work. And the reason that artists like Fenneker are the top of the food chain is that when you look at all of his work, it's the same lens, the same distortion, the same opinion, the same sensibility. There's no question that this and this are the same guy. That's not. That's not. Where's the other ones? There's more Fenneker here somewhere. Where was he? Here. Let's see if this does it. Come on. Why is it doing this? Well, I gotta just do it this way. But yeah, you know, you could just tell. It's the same sense of distortion. So I got caught up in my technical problems there, but it does kind of, I hopefully illustrate the importance of study, the importance of, it's like, you know, you can't be an architect making crazy buildings if you don't know how to make a column or an arch. So I think that it's important for artists to really understand all the foundation. And I think it's important for then anyone considering these kind of works, and this is what we try to do in these books, is to understand the time in which they were made as best as you can. Because it does inform, like, why did he draw her in this way? And you'd have to, I mean, that's, you know, too long of a conversation for right now, but you'd have to understand what the Weimar Republic was, what was happening culturally and politically. And I mean, the super fast answer I can give is that everybody drew beautifully before World War I. And you got all of these artists that went to war and watched their friends being killed and went through this shell-shocked experience of the explosions, and all of a sudden those beautiful lines to draw landscapes didn't work anymore, just did not cover what that felt like. And so you started seeing people using these really bold lines to try to convey that. Well, now these artists come back to Germany. And if you think about Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where you've got these distorted buildings. I'll go down, close your eyes. This is going to make you car sick. Where is it? Sorry. But like, look at the distortion now on these buildings. You know, and think about Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the way everything felt super oppressive. What the artists were doing then in Germany after the First World War was they were finding a way to capture the sensibility of what life felt like. Life felt faster than it ever had before. So elongated shapes, the idea of speed, the idea that this buildings are leaning in, that the velocity of progress and technology were feeling a little oppressive. And they loved it, they celebrated it. It wasn't like Art Nouveau where they were going the other direction. But when you look at Dr. Caligari and you're looking at the way the buildings angle in, it's the idea that when you're walking through those streets, there's kind of like a cultural and social pressure coming from the Depression and the complete decimation of the economy. The poverty was unbelievable at this time. This poster is 1920. And so at that time, it was very stressful. It was very depressing. And the art reflected that. So the question, like, I don't know where it is, but, why does she look like that? It's like, because there was a lot of sex, there was a lot of drugs, there was a lot of poverty. The black market was far more powerful and prevalent than any department store. And it crept into the culture in terms of the way people were communicating what it felt like to live at that time. So I guess I did kind of explain it a little bit. I mean, there's a lot more. There's a lot of books on it, but Michael, thank you for your comment. Forrest, where did I learn my preservation techniques? I don't do any of it. We use restorers for that. It's very time intensive, and you certainly could damage something. And so I don't want in any way to risk that. So I take it completely to a professional to make sure that it's cared for properly. Sorry if that was an anticlimactic answer. Look at this. And so this is kind of a funny thing I do. I complain about this all the time. I'm like the Grandpa Simpson yelling at the cloud. You see this, and it was attributed when they put it in an auction catalog as attributed to Fenneker. And it's not. It's so visibly not Fenneker. But Fenneker did this. He did the German release poster. But, I mean, it's just not. I mean, the guy's kind of copying the style a little bit, but look at, like, he's getting some of the skull. But look at her face. Like, this is the kind of stuff, the artistic archaeology you can do. Look at her face, look at her hand, look at her fingers. It looks American, and it is an American release poster, but it looks like it's based in that American aesthetic. Like, doesn't this look a little more American silent filmy? And then you look at the way Fenneker did women. Like, that's just not even the same planet. Look at that woman's face. Look at her chin, how small it is, the nose, the shape. He's distorting her entire face. Same thing here. And then you look at this, and it's just not the same artist. He's drawing, I mean, someone's trying to do his work, but I mean, this is actually even more of a giveaway if you want to see how I do my archaeology. Like, look at that. Look at how detailed that is. That is a Western mindset. That's like the American English sensibility, the way that's drawn. Like, look at all of it. All the ribs are drawn, the muscles are drawn in there. It's someone drawing well, trying to be a little distorted. And then look at, like, and then you've got, I'm so sorry for this. Don't vomit. I feel like I'm spinning people around. But then look at now his sense of anatomy. Guys, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Look at that. Now look at this anatomy. Like, that guy left the planet. It's just, this guy, he left academic drawing behind years ago. So, anyway, those are the kind of clues of, let's see. Who is the intended audience for Jugendstil? Is that what you meant to ask? Oh, I see. Yeah, Sean. Okay. The audience for Jugendstil. I don't think that culturally in Germany at the turn of the century, you had divisions exactly the way that we might think of it. We are living in a time where we have an incredible cultural and wealth disparity. And I think that there was probably, I mean, I guess it is this way with the entertainment industry. At the turn of the century, there was money in salons. There was money in how do I put it? Let me come at this another way. When they made the book Jugend, the magazine, I should have brought some up here. Artists were starting to draw in this style. You'd had the Munich secession in 1892. And the term secession was coined by George Hirth, who published Jugend. So the idea that you had, I apologize, the idea that you had this burgeoning, exciting new art movement that was kind of starting to percolate around the world, and you had these secession exhibitions that were inviting foreign artists to come in. They're looking at the things coming out of Japan. They're looking at things coming from France and to some degree probably Italy. The audience for that would have been anyone curious in what was exciting and new. And I'm saying that in the sense of, a bad blockbuster film is exciting and new. And so it wasn't like just art people that were buying this. You had color lithography happening. And you had it not really present in France. I'm trying to give a really thoughtful response to this, and it's a lot of information I've never thought about, so I'm processing it. You had color lithography happening in France. It wasn't really happening in Germany in that way. So the idea that you could make what essentially were little 8.5 by 11 posters that would be on a newspaper rack was revolutionary. We all think of color magazine covers now, but imagine a newsstand where there were no color covers. And you did have some of that in England. You did have, You did have some of that in uh, England. You did have some of that in France. But the thing that was important here was that it wasn't just like a Penny Dreadful kind of thing. You had a thing that was connecting to the most exciting, newest artists. I'm sorry. Can you shut the door, please? The most exciting new artists. Uh, I'm so sorry. I was interrupted, and so I lost my train of thought. Um, you had the most exciting new artists doing this style that was exciting and new, and they were in color. So now that I have my focus again, I'm sorry, I can get into this. And so the people that were buying it were just, it was literally a cross section of anybody that was interested. It's like who would go to see a Marvel movie. And so the idea that it was just creatives might have, I think it was a very left-leaning magazine in terms of, that critic cartoon that showed someone saying, oh, this is an effrontery to classicism. But what they were offended by was this entire new art movement, this reignition of interest in mythology and classicism through the lens of what really appealed to later psychedelic artists. So I know that was a long answer. I'm so sorry. That was distracting. But the point is, it was for everybody, and that was why it was so successful. Because it wasn't just art students that were buying it. It was somebody's aunt. It was the shopkeeper. Like, there were jokes in there. It was very comedic. It was light. It was fun. It was thought-provoking. And it was also really exciting. And it was terribly successful. The magazine ran for decades and decades. And even though in this first year it was kind of this fumbling forward experiment, they were onto something. And it was really beautiful and really powerful. And so because everyone adopted it, it's what helped Jugendstil, it's what helped Art Nouveau really take root in the entire country. And yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry. That was a hard one for me to get my head around, and then the distraction was a little hard. But we've got 17 minutes left. I'm wondering if I should maybe open up the Jugendstil catalog. Where is it? What's something that I'm excited about is it's kind of sad to say this, but I'm really, really, really proud of this first, and Chandra, you can connect this, really, really proud of this first book. You've got this beautiful psychedelic work mixed with this kind of, these two pieces are a good example. You see where the elements of classicism are in there. I love this artwork. It's like comic book art. You've got an entire narrative in one panel. I just love that ink spilling and the bold strokes, and from the spilled ink comes all of these visions. But a lot of these are still kind of more rooted in illustration and classicism, and you've got artists like Witzel that were pushing the edge a little bit, and every issue is going to get, like every volume of our book is going to get crazier and crazier and crazier. There's lots of stuff like this in there, and I do love it. I do love it, but it's like it is rooted in classicism. You do see, again, great inspiration for any artist or illustrator. You're starting to see the hints of it, and then here, great line work, but the fact that her dress is the flower, we're starting to see the hints of it. Great ideas. This is actually, there was a little article about this new invention. So this was kind of a news report about X-rays. And the artist was kind of making a joke that someone had made in the media that you could use X-rays to find out if your lover had a heart. But a lot of these things are kind of based in classicism. And then you get into the guys like Witzel. Like, look at that. The choice of color, the choice of line, the bizarre composition. Like, this is a hint of what's coming next. And I really am excited about that. So the people that are interested in the more psychedelic artwork, these two are a great example. Like, I love this. It's definitely classical compared to that. I mean, like, where's her spine? Like, look at where her head is and look at the back. There's no anatomy there. It's all design. Whereas this honors anatomy. As it should, like that is the classical thing. It's kind of like we were talking about earlier with Egon Schiele. The art world at that time had done the labor to be able to do these things really effectively. And then, I mean, like, here, look at this Diaz piece. Like, look at that. It's beautifully drawn. Beautifully drawn. And they were at a point culturally where the students that were saying what's next from the Munich Academy were stepping into this space. And so to me, that's when you start to get that glimmer of the thing that is exciting that leads to an artistic revolution. And very literally, it did, because Art Nouveau, Jugendstil, we all know what it is today. And we're all here because we love it. But illustrations like this did not exist 5 years earlier. It's crazy to think about. When we think about like technology and we talk about AI or even things like Photoshop, like think about the days of when you had to physically cut and paste and put things together to go to print and that kind of absence of digital assistance. Well, at this time in art history, these kind of drawings were out there. And then you come in with that, and it's just where's it from? And a lot of it has to do with those Eastern traditions. Like, it's very influenced by art. I got to qualify that. When I'm saying it didn't exist before, I'm saying it didn't exist in America. It didn't exist in Germany. It didn't exist in these countries that we're discussing. The closest you would get are the things that were a little bit more medieval. And if you had something where the anatomy wasn't correct, it was in a more primitive way. And none of that is actually really represented in this book. So, well, maybe a little less. No, not really. But yeah, here's another, I think, that's Witzel as well. I mean, look at that line work. Like, that's not fabric. What is he doing there? He's suggesting it in such a beautiful, beautiful way. And Sean wants to know how many volumes there will be. Fewer than you would think, because by 1900 you had the Exposition Universal, and Art Nouveau kind of became a little I don't want to say passe, but it was like we started to move into modernism. In 1902, in Turin, I believe is where the exhibition. Yeah, in 1902 in Turin, you had the Macintosh movement come to life. The Spook School, the super slender, super vertical, kind of the seeds of what became Art Deco were planted. And so in Jugend magazine, it's from 1896 to 1900 that you see the really groundbreaking work. And after there's great work in there, but it almost starts to get a little bit back closer maybe to the classical. They don't ride the wave into like what Charles Rennie Mackintosh or Margaret were doing. And so the thing that we're going to do is really focus on 1896 to 1900. And then maybe like an afterword that kind of is like the best of the next few years. 1896 will be 2 volumes, and the next one will kickstart next month. And then I think that next year we'll do 3 volumes, and those will all be from 1897 because there's so much good work in there. And so much was happening that from a text point of view that I feel is important to explain. You had the Vienna Secession happen in 1897. So 1896 in Europe was really right before, like 1897 is when the explosion happened. And you did have Mucha coming up in 1895, 1896. But 1897 is just when this really became ubiquitous. And so artists were really feeding on each other in a circular way. I shouldn't say feeding on, they were fueling each other. And it just gets really crazy. So 1897, 1898, 1899, and 1900 will probably each be 3 volumes. So it'll wind up being probably like 15 volumes. But we're going to space it out so that people don't go broke. We're looking at it like comic book graphic novels in the sense of if you love reading Fantastic Four, you're happy if one comes out every 4 or 5 months. And so we're going to kind of treat it that way, which is it'll take a few years to do, but we'll basically put them out as fast as the market requests. Like if people want them every month, like I can hurry up and work on them and get it done, but we just don't want to overload people. And there's other stuff we want to put out as well. So that's important. I have not been to Vienna, but I see that Forrest, yeah. It's so funny. Whenever I would see a picture of the Secession building, it always looked boring to me when I would see it before I understood all of this. And I would just see little pictures in books. And then once I understood artistically what the movement was doing, it just changed my whole perspective of what they did with that space. And I would love to see it. I'd also very, very much love to see what they have at Darmstadt. A friend of mine went there once. She was someone who worked with me. And she was always like, because I was always talking about Darmstadt. And she wound up being near there, so she took a train to do a day trip to go to the Darmstadt Museum. And loved it. And it was just funny when she came back, she'd taken a bunch of pictures. She's like, now I get why you love Darmstadt so much. It's like a Halloween version of arts and crafts or something. She was showing me like these metal handles on a dresser that were owl faces, and it was just all really, it's beautiful. I love Jugendstil, and I love the Secession, and I love the Darmstadt art. Darmstadt is kind of like, Jugendstil is like Art Nouveau, Secession is kind of like early modernism, and Darmstadt is arts and crafts. The Darmstadt colony in 1901, basically the prince, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, had the idea what if we got the greatest artists of the country together and put them in an artist colony and had them all work together to make architecture and fabric and silverware and just really elevate the output of the country. And you had architects like Peter Behrens, like revolutionary minds. And so in 1901, for 1 year, they just changed the entire course of design history. But much like a supergroup, egos started to have a complicated set of interactions. By 1902, people started leaving, and it's still around today, but not. Actually, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm thinking the secession's still around today. But the point is the Darmstadt experiment, even though I think they were still doing things in the 20s, it was like a band that just had one spectacular album. And then maybe some of their other years would have been just as impressive if it wasn't for what happened in 1901. But the really psychedelic work by Hans Christiansen was all from Darmstadt in 1901. It was just amazing. And that idea of the complete artwork, the idea that a painter could work in fabric and that an architect could design silverware and that all of these things could cross-pollinate. Darmstadt is really, some people might say the Wiener Werkstatt is a pinnacle of that, but I think Darmstadt is kind of a clearer point just because it is so... it wasn't a store, it was a colony, So you had buildings and all these things all together in one place. And we are at the end of our hour. So I hope some of that was interesting. I hope if you don't have these books that you'll grab them and we can do maybe some book specific. Maybe we should do that on Patreon, is do some book specific chats in case there's stuff that you guys want to talk about, like maybe a deeper dive into some of the artists. What I'm doing in the books is I'm trying to give enough information so that you understand how they fit into the movement and maybe a couple little anecdotes. But with a lot of these artists, there's a lot more to tell. It's just kind of with any book, there's only so many pages. But thank you, everybody, for being here. And go check out the Kickstarter. That's up for another week. And we will see you online. Charles, I'm like 20 emails behind to you. You guys are the best. I appreciate you immensely. And maybe this is a Patreon conversation about how to do these in a way where we can interact a little better. I know I say that every time, and I don't remember it until I'm standing here talking. It's kind of like a phone where the earpiece doesn't work. But anyway, thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you in a month.